Hello everyone, and welcome back to one of my reviews today. I apologize for not making a video in about a week or two now, but it's been about a few weeks, about a week or two, at least for me, that I rewatched Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead about twice now, and for it to really let me sink into the film and give you my own assessment of the film. And of course, this here is not the first time Zack Snyder has done either a reboot and or like a small contained movie. This is like a part of a franchise that's starting to expand. And of course, this is not the first film he's directed that's a zombie based, with his very first film back in 2004 being the Dawn of the Dead remake, which is a remake of a George A. Romero movie back in the 70s. Back in the 1970s, there was a zombie movie back then. So he does a lot of reboots. But to be fair, this is a damn good zombie movie. Now, onto his own Army of the Dead. And basically, the movie is about this. Dave Bautista and a bunch of these renegade soldiers, renegades or people like that, and they go into a zombie-infested Las Vegas, which is just like, it's self-contained, which is really weird to think because Las Vegas is not self-contained as a city. There's a few geographical errors like that in this movie. But they send them into this area, and this bunch of infested with a bunch of zombies. And essentially plan to get them in. They essentially get them to go into this casino and take out a bunch of $250 million, take it out, and they all get a share if they all survive the ordeal. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And here's what I like about this movie. Shoving to the side what I like and didn't like, here's the thing about Zack Snyder. He himself is not that particularly great of subtlety or creativity. He knows how to make a movie have a great sense of slow motion and flair and unique vibeness that really, really makes it do a Zack Snyder touch. That really makes a movie like, oh, you can tell like this is his type of movie by the certain identities, tone, and everything. But there's films of his that know how to have this straight up simple action and narrative focus that keeps it simple and straightforward, while there's other of his films that keep it a little bit more philosophically in the air. While at times he can do both. I think Watchmen, his extended cut, is a good example of how it could be both. But Dawn of the Dead and 300 are good examples of how he can keep it cut and simple and dry with a narrative and story and character, and keep it so much more dynamically focused on that without having too much on his brain. Because Snyder, either you like him or not, is not a deep, cynical. He's a very cynical filmmaker. He's very jaded. He doesn't have too much of a clever-esque bone to what he does, which is why I always felt, at least in my view, why he's the worst filmmaker ideal to make Superman. I'm not gonna act like Man of Steel is a terrible movie, but it fundamentally misses so much on the mark there, and I do think that Man of Steel, a lot of people say Man of Steel is underrated. Think again why you think it's underrated. Because there's not much to love in the movie to begin with. I'm sorry. Man of Steel is just not a good Superman movie, and I never ever will give the movie a second chance. Thanks to him, I've given up in the DCEU, and you will never get a review of me giving my opinion on the Justice League extended cut. I'm sorry. I've had it up to here with the DCEU. I've learned to not trust it. I hope my bosses are like, oh, you should watch it and review it. I'm sorry. I'm never going to give that series a chance. I don't care. I don't care if it's rebooting. I don't care if it's getting better. It's earned its chances. It has failed time after time within the series. And yes, I do probably own Shazam and Wonder Woman. That's about it. I'm sorry. I'm never going to give the DC series a chance. I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest. I'm permanently done with that. The DC animated movies, I don't care if they made it longer or cut. But what I've heard a problem with this movie and the Snyder cut of Justice League is that just because you can make a movie longer doesn't automatically make it better. And one of my big problems with Army of the Dead is that it feels kind of redundant and a little bit too full of itself. It's a movie that tries to have these deeper thoughts, like, you know, the main character played by Dave Bautista being estranged from his own daughter and not being there as much in relation and how he relate and how he has other chemistry with everyone else in the movie. The movie has so much of his, not so much, but has enough in its mind that tries to be a little bit smarter, rather than cutting down the pace and the structure and trying to just, you know, the fat around the movie, because this movie is like 2 hours and 30 minutes. They could, in my view, this movie could be cut like 15 to 20 minutes less, and it would be fine. It would have too much. This movie has too much on its plate where its simple premise just feels long and drawn out. And as much as I like the action and the characters, well, the characters to a certain extent, because the characters like the story, like the situation at hand, it was fun. It had the fundamentals there, but it never really had enough. This movie overall, this movie never really had enough to it that made me realize what makes this movie special. It feels, it's okay, but there's nothing about, I'm sorry to say this in truth, there's nothing about Army of the Dead that makes it special. It has this vivacious, when you look at the poster and the artwork and everything, it has this really vivacious and pop art type of flair to it, like a lot of comic book movies are doing now. But when they do that, it feels too little too late, because they forget to have the style become the substance, which is something I could totally give an argument for 300, or with a stylized approach of Watchmen with its comic booky vibes, or Dawn of the Dead with its more visceral approach to the subject matter. This movie has it's more visual popcorn aesthetic with all the pinks and oranges and everything coming at you like all comic booky. It feels too artificial that you kind of are like, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm too little too late. It has failed to give the movie its earns. The movie doesn't really know what it's going for. And when it does that, it's a movie that spreads itself too thin, and the premise and the story and the narrative gets so drawn out that you're just like, as I said before, you feel like you could just cut out certain parts. And yes, you understand character motives and background and everything, but it's nothing without the proper structure. Like, if there's anything I learned from my third release of the Lord of the Rings movies, what my particular favorite Fellowship of the Ring being right here, I want to say this. The movie's length is what, if you can make a movie long, that's fine. It's just pacing and structure and the characters of how you keep it from being long and drawn out to being dynamic with the story. Because as long as it knows how to have the right amount of energy, momentum, and pacing and writing to keep it sharp and fresh there, then it can be as long as it wants. And I could find it endlessly rewatchable, because you just find yourself really enthralled and really enriched by the world, and that can kind of make you forgive some of the sloppier storytelling along the way. That's how someone like me could actually tolerate the Hobbit films, even though they are vastly inferior to the Lord of the Rings movies. But with Dawn of the Dead here, or with Army of the Dead, is that the characters are not that interesting. There's nothing about this movie that really makes it so uniquely distinctive, or really unique, that makes it, like, I think my dad says, me and my dad were talking about this movie, and we said, it has good stuff in it, but there's nothing that made about this movie that really wowed us. There was nothing about it that really made it feel uniquely distinctive, like this is Zack Snyder's best army movie, or something like zombie movie, or remake, or reboot, or something like that. It really isn't. It's an overall decent movie, and that's how I can really get by with it, because the action and certain character builds and payoffs aren't there, and are there at the same time. And this movie's a weird mess, but it has good enough. The premise I liked enough. I thought was fine. The action kicks it pretty good damn amount of the time is a fairly solid approach. The zombie CGI tiger was a truly great character, or I wouldn't say character, but it was a great moment to have with certain parts. And there's certain parts in the movie that really are like incredibly fun and vivacious and have such energy. But it feels so sparse narratively and structurally that you kind of feel like this movie has some real ups and downs with quality time in it. And the movie makes you feel like it's really I won't say disjointed, but as I said, the pacing makes it feel so too indulgent, and overall makes the movie feel like a real mess. I'm not saying this is like a flawed masterpiece or whatever, because those two titles are total contradictions. A movie can't have flaws without being a true masterpiece. Or what I'm trying to say is that Zack Snyder is the type of filmmaker to try and earn his piece of pie while understanding what he's going for, and I feel like that's how he can get too in over his head with a more philosophically deep movie, or a very forgettable one, like his Owl movie. Does anyone remember that? Or the Owl's a Gahul or something like that? It was a really forgettable. Sucker Punch was just a gross, dumb action movie that had nothing to offer. At least Man of Steel was at least philosophically interesting, even though it was such a 180 on the character. But anyway, only that I'm very conflicted overall, but it did have like the checklist of like, how was the story? It was okay. And problems. How was the action? How was the characters? How was the performances? Everything. It was just good enough in certain areas to say I would recommend it for anyone else. Like anyone who likes action movies or zombie movies or heist movies or any movie with a certain degree of an edge to it, like a dark cynicism to it, because it has some really good, strange to say, weird to say, I forgot to bring this up, this movie has some legit good moments of comedy. Weird to say for an action zombie movie, but it really does, in my view. The comedy is actually surprisingly good in this. But overall, it's a really conflicting movie. And when overall seeing the reviews and the ratings, I'm like, yeah, I do see why now. Overall, for me, I would overall say I enjoyed Army of the Dead. Overall, okay to enough. I would just recommend overall. And I'm going to give Army of the Dead a 6.5 out of 10. That's my review of the one. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I really do hope you enjoyed my review. As always, till then, have a great rest of the day. Until then, be safe and aware. Actually, I don't want to get too bizarre about that. Whatever. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the future. As always, till then, cheers. Stay safe.